Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 45 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I am glad that you're listening. Got a couple of stories that I wanted to dive into today before I get to the tips this week in the abbreviated schedule, both in the number of games as well as in the number of days that it's going to take to play those games. First off, I think we can all agree that along with the Giants, the Bombers have been one of the most difficult teams to figure out this year. A ton of talent, but you never knew what team you were going to get from one week to the next. And I guess you could throw the D's in there as well, although the D's have, in many ways, have righted the ship a little bit. But I have to tell you, it didn't look like things were going to change during the first half of round 14 either, because the Hawks blew out to a massive lead. And then something strange happened. A 6'7" young man with a bushy mustache and knee-high socks reminded himself that he's one of the best key forwards in the game and took it over. And that was, of course, Joe Daniher. And Joe Daniher helped to bring the Bombers back from a 30-point deficit to win that game. And wasn't it fantastic to see him back out there? There was all of the talk about him leaving the club last offseason, and it didn't happen. If I'm not mistaken, there was talk about him going to Sydney. And maybe that still happens this year. But he has battled through some serious injuries. He's got himself healthy. He went out there playing in a game without having played a scratch match at all. He had just competed in practice, and maybe it just took him that while, that amount of time to knock the rust off of himself and realize, you know what? I'm a pretty damn good player, and I need to start showing that. So it was terrific to see him back out there. He had 3 goals, 3 behinds. He had 10 marks, 14 disposals for the game. I don't know about you, but again, I'm not a Bombers supporter. But it was fantastic to see him back out there. And if you're a Bombers supporter, you have to be excited. If you're a Footy fan, you've got to be thrilled to see him back out there, because you want to see Joe Daniher hopefully being able to compete in the way that he's competed in the past, being able to get airborne, to take the speckies that he has taken during his career. Now, will his groin injury allow him to leap as high as he had leaped in the past? I don't know. I certainly hope so, but I have no idea. But that sure looked like the Joe Daniher of old this past weekend. And that was fantastic to see. So glad that he's back out there. And that was one heck of a win. That was one heck of a comeback. One of the best comebacks I'd ever seen. Until the one that happened the next day. And, while I mentioned, the Bombers' comeback here, it was impressive. But when you think about it, look at what happened to the Cats the other day. Now, I traded a couple little notes online with Frode from Stray Dog Footy Podcast about the game. He's a huge Bulldogs fan. Now, and it was a great game. And I'm not somebody that gloats about games. I'm not somebody that's going to get online and say, "Oh, look, my team thrashed your team." I'm not. It's not my style. I'm not going to do that. Partly because I'm a Cleveland sports fan, and if you're here in the States, you know what that means. That, well, pretty much most of my teams that I support have stunk for quite some time. There have been a couple of exceptions, however, but the Cleveland Browns have been awful for a long time, and more often than not, the Cavaliers have not been great. And the Indians, well, they haven't won a World Series. They haven't won a championship since my mom was 6. And she's going to be in her late 70s in a couple of months. So we haven't had a whole lot to cheer for here, although the Cavs did win the championship a couple of years ago. But I got to work on Friday morning, and again, I'm 14 hours behind Melbourne, so I get to school at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, the game started here at 5:50 a.m., and it took me a while to get the game to sync with the Apple TV box that's in my classroom. So I was trying to get it playing on my phone and then sending it up to the television screen so I could watch it there as I'm preparing my classroom for the day. It was my last day of preparation before we had students come back to school today. So we didn't have anything to do other than working on things in our classroom. So I don't have to be there until 7:30. So I had an hour and a half worth of time to watch the game, and I finished the game there as well. But as I'm getting the game situated and turned on, it popped up on the screen for a second, and I wanted it to start back at the beginning. So I didn't know where the game had been at that point. So I didn't know what was going on in the first quarter of the game until the screen popped on, and I saw the score in the bottom left-hand corner, and it said Western Bulldogs 26, Geelong Cats 1. And I'm thinking to myself, just turn the darn thing off. This is over already. Well, I didn't do that. I got the video adjusted so I was able to back it off to the start of the game. Watched it from the opening bounce. I had to figure out how the heck did they get to have 26 points halfway through the first quarter. What was going on that allowed that to happen? And the Cats were just absolutely sloppy with the ball, and the Bulldogs were deadly. They got it close. They put it between the sticks. It was an onslaught that I didn't think the Cats were going to recover from. In fact, if you watched the game, you saw that by early in the second quarter, they were down 40-3. Now, raise your hand if you thought the Cats were going to come back and win that game, having been down 37 points. For the record, my hands are firmly gripping the corners of my desk. My hands didn't go up. I didn't think they had a snowball's chance in Hades of winning that game. But I'll tell you what, it was thrilling to watch them fight back. I didn't think they were going to I still didn't think they were going to win it, even into the fourth quarter. But it was great to see them battling back. Trust me, I am thrilled. I'm ecstatic that they won the game. But the fact that they battled back and got to the point where they were in position to win it, to me, was huge. I mean, that's the kind of thing that the Cats have maybe lacked in some instances in the last few years, because they've gotten close to being able to play in the grand final. They've gotten close, and they've fallen short. Last year they were the minor premiers, and they fell short. They went out in straight sets. I think they lost 2 games in a row, if I'm not mistaken. They lost to the Pies, and I think to the Tigers, or did they beat the Eagles in between there? I think they might have beaten the Eagles in between, but they lost to the Tigers as well before the grand final, and you could argue one way or the other whether or not Tom Hawkins' elbow that he threw. Yeah, they did beat the Eagles, because that was when Hawkins was suspended for that game. That had Hawkins kept his elbows to himself. Do they beat the Tigers last year? I don't know. Maybe. I can't say that with any kind of certainty. I'm not going to sit here and pound the desk and say absolutely they would have won. I think their chances probably would have been better had he played. But that was a decision that was made, and we had to move on from there. But this comeback on Friday morning or Friday evening was one for the ages. I think they said that this was the biggest comeback from a first quarter deficit of that size since, I believe they said 1931. If I heard correctly during the broadcast, 1931. So that's 69, 70, that's 89 years ago. I mean, it was improbable. And I'm thrilled that it happened. Okay, don't get me wrong. And I'm so glad that Geelong won. I think the Bulldogs are a fantastic club. But the Cats just, in the second half, they just wanted it more. I mean, you had seven different players score goals during the game, so it wasn't all relying on Tom Hawkins. I think he kicked 2 goals. Brian Myers did as well. Gary Rowan, with that fantastic, game clinching goal at the end, if you will. And I think you might see that embrace, where Luke Dahlhaus jumped into his arms after that goal was scored. That's probably going to show up in video clips 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. If this turns out to be a successful year for the Cats, which, again, knock on wood, I'm certainly hoping so. But that was an impressive comeback, and what's really surprising is that by the time that game was wrapping up, several of my coworkers, the other teachers that work in the same hallway as I do, they were there in their classrooms, and I know I was not quiet, but not a single one of them came over to see what I was hooting and hollering about. I think they had an idea already because I talk footy all the time. I don't know if that necessarily annoys them or not, but, and, just on a quick side note, while it hasn't become official yet where the grand final is going to be played, they've kind of alluded to the fact that it's going to be a nighttime grand final. So it sounds like it's going to be a 7 p.m. start on the East Coast in Australia, which to me is fantastic because that's a 5 a.m. start on Saturday morning, the 24th. So I've already told a couple people that, you're more than, you've got an open invitation to come over and watch the grand final, whomever is playing it. Now, again, who I hope is playing in it, but we'll see if that happens. But whoever's playing, it's going to be great to be able to watch that at that point in time because that's typically when, I would be getting up in the morning anyway because I'm not much of a late sleeper. So we had two great comebacks this weekend. It was wonderful to see. I was just excited about it. And just as I was putting the finishing touches on this episode, I got an email from somebody who's on my mailing list, a gentleman by the name of Jim Longo, and he was commenting about the staging that I had talked about in the last episode. And he had suggested that maybe the league, and he was joking about this, but I thought it was rather funny. He was saying that maybe the league should, if it's determined that somebody was staging, which is basically acting, that maybe they have that player who is, what's the right word, convicted of it or found that they did do it, that maybe they're forced to take acting lessons for the entire week before their next game and not allowed to participate in any kind of team activities. They're not allowed to train or anything like that, that they have to take acting lessons. I thought that was really funny. Yeah, again, that's not necessarily a realistic thing, but it was pretty humorous. So I thought I would go ahead and pass that along because love getting feedback from people listening, and I thought that was hilarious. So I figured I'd share it. And I wanted to get into one sad story, if you will, before I dive into my tips for this week, and that's the story of that just broke today when I got home from school and sat down and started reading some news online. The story about Danny Frawley that broke today that confirmed what maybe some people had suspected, that it was announced just in the last couple of days or maybe even yesterday that his widow Anita confirmed that the beloved Saint and former co-host of Bounce was suffering from stage 2 CTE when he died. And to contrast that, Polly Farmer had been diagnosed with, not diagnosed, but identified after his passing as having stage 3 CTE, which they said, kind of helped to manifest itself in his dementia as he had when he got older. Now, Danny Frawley's widow, Anita, stated in the article, and I've posted the link to the article in the show notes, stated that as his wife for over 30 years, I strongly suspected there was more going on with Danny than straightforward depression. I'm very grateful for the work of the Australian Sports Brain Bank in shining a light on this disease. We want to prevent other families from going through what we did. Now, while Spud was a big advocate for mental health issues, he talked about it a lot. He's one of the reasons why in my show notes every week I have the numbers there for both Australia and the United States. If you need to talk to somebody, if there's a mental health thing that you need to talk about, those numbers are in my show notes. Go find them, reach out to somebody, talk to somebody. There are people there to help. I battled depression about 20 years ago. Almost 19 years ago. 9/11 occurred, and within like 3 weeks of 9/11 having occurred, my father passed away unexpectedly, and the latter part of 2001 into 2002 was just a very difficult time for me. I did take some medication for my depression. My wife still says that I still am depressed, which I can't say that I necessarily disagree with her because I tend to be maudlin about things quite frequently. You tend to laugh things up and put on that game face. And I am not equating myself to Danny Frawley here, but that's what Spud did. He always put on that, at least what we saw in the public, that persona of the the fun-loving, happy-go-lucky guy who was always ready to be the brunt of the jokes on Bounce. And again, that's the frame of reference that I have. I've seen video clips of him as a player, but what I knew him from was watching Bounce. So it's looking back at some of those episodes, it's easy to see where it was in many cases, I don't want to say obvious, but evident that he was hurting inside. And, like I said, if you have issues, if you need to talk to somebody, those numbers are in my show notes. Reach out. Find somebody to talk to. We're in hellaciously difficult times right now, folks, whether it be, the fact, that we're wearing masks everywhere we go, or you're being told you're not allowed to go more than 5 kilometers away from your home, depending on where you're living. These are difficult times, and we've got to look out for each other here. So, don't be afraid to reach out to that friend. Even if you think that they're going to be fine, you know what? They may want to hear from you. Even if it's just a message on Twitter or on Facebook, or you shoot them a text message. That at least lets them know you're thinking about them. Don't be afraid to do that. So it's very sad news about Danny Frawley, but I don't think many of us are surprised by what has been announced. And supposedly there are some other things that are going to be coming out after, that are going to be released from the autopsy that was conducted after he passed, but those things have not been released yet. So there's no speculating going to be happening here at all. Now, evidently he had suffered from a number of concussions during his time as a player. And those of you who are longtime Saints fans or have been watching the game for, decades, you could probably seek back in your memory and remember instances where he got his bell rung, so to speak. So, look out for one another. And if you have not had a chance, and probably many of you here in the U.S. have seen this, but I don't know how widely spread this film was in Australia, but I encourage you to take a look at the Will Smith film called Concussion. I highly recommend it, and it's the story of how this pathologist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he was a gentleman, was from, I believe, Nigeria. So he didn't know anything about the NFL or American football. He was a pathologist. He worked to try to identify the cause of death in individuals, who were in his morgue. And he is the person who is in many cases credited with discovering and identifying CTE in NFL players, and was one of the first to publish medical data on this malady, because again, there's no way to test for it or identify it while the patient is living. You can have the characteristics of it or the symptoms of it, but you can't say specifically that yes, this person does in fact have it. So if you get a chance to see the movie Concussion, it's a great Will Smith film. It's not an action film at all. It's it's very much a drama, and what this doctor endured to try to bring this issue to light is very revealing. And so I highly recommend it. And Spud, Footy fans, we all miss you. We'll never forget the laughs. We'll never forget the memories of you playing. And, even in your passing, you're helping people by having this malady identified in you and maybe helping to figure out a way to prevent it. Bless you, sir. Bless your family. And it's, it's like I said, it's very sad, but it's great to see that, that we kind of got confirmation of what many of us had suspected. So, those are really the 3 stories I wanted to get into this week. I know that I'll have an episode a little bit later this week. I probably will only give you my tips for round 16 there, because we're going to have a 3 or 4 day turnaround here. So I'll be honest, I don't know how many of the games I'm going to be able to watch this week because of this quick turnaround. So we shall see. I do plan on watching the Adelaide game tomorrow morning when I get to work, however. But I wanted to dive into my tips for this week, not like they actually matter, because in round 14, I got 3 games right. So, again, if you're listening to me on these and you're taking my advice, Stop already, okay? I mean, the only games I got the Port Adelaide game right. Okay, that was a pretty significant victory. But the other two that I got right were the Bombers and the Cats. And heck, they were both down by 30 points or almost 40 points into the second quarter. So theoretically, had Hawthorn and Western been able to hang on, I would have gotten just 1 out of 8 right for this week. So I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen, but I don't have a clue, okay? So let's just get into that. So here we go, the first game this week, which is going to be happening in about 12 hours, which is why I'm wanting to get this episode out. And I've got the Crows getting their first win of the year. I've got Adelaide beating Hawthorn by 8 points. And I think this is where the Crows are going to get their first win of the season. Hawthorn, I think, was devastated by the loss last week. They've been in a bit of a free fall already. Even though they played a good first half against the Bombers, but the Bombers just came back and hammered them in the second half. And they've not figured out a way to get a win in the last 4 rounds. And sure, on paper, they should beat Adelaide. But if you watch the Crows' last game before their bye week, when they played the Cats, and I saw somebody mention this in one of the, or maybe I heard it in a podcast, but they said that had you watched that game and you didn't know which team was 8-4 at the time and which team was 0-12 at the time, you probably would have guessed wrong. Because in the first half of that game, Adelaide took it to the Cats. They really did. They played some of the most inspired footy I'd seen all year by anybody. Those young men are playing for Coach Nick. So I think that bodes well for them in the future once they start bringing in some younger talent and getting that list built back up. So I think this is the week where they've had a week off. I think this is an opportunity for them to get their first win. It's probably their last opportunity for them to get their first win because I think they've got some tough contests coming up the rest of the way. So I think that the Crows get their first win this week and get the 4 points. Sure, they're still going to be getting the wooden spoon, but at least they're going to have something tasty on that wooden spoon now, and that's going to be 4 points. So I'm going with Adelaide in the first game this round. Now the second game this round, you might argue that this is the one of the games of the week, and that's West Coast and Essendon. And I've got the Eagles winning this one by 11 points. And the Eagles are definitely premiership contenders. They struggled last week against the Tigers, but they are still a top 4, top 5 team. I think they're going to be there before it's all said and done. And the Bombers, they're going to be playing with a great deal of confidence. They've got Joe Daniher back. He's going to be named to play again this week, so 2 weeks in a row. Dyson Heppel's going to be back playing his first game since round 2, coming back pretty quickly from his broken ankle. And, while the Bombers played really inspired footy in that second half of their game last week, I think the Eagles are, at this point in time, too talented a club. And they've, Essendon absolutely has to win every game the rest of the way to have a shot at finals. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think that the Eagles are going to take this game by about 11 points. And I think they're going to be thrilled to have their captain back in the lineup. I think that they're going to be, using this time to figure out whether or not Joe Daniher wants to remain a member of this club going into 2021. Because, and I think we talked about this earlier in the episode, there was talk early on about Daniher going to Sydney last year, if I'm not mistaken. Is he going to want to still make a move out of the hangar after this year? Or is he going to want to stay with the Bombers? This is, if nothing else, it's a sell job to try to convince Joe Daniher to stay with the club. Or maybe they're going to decide that they want to move on from him anyways. I have no idea what management of the club is going to be thinking. So maybe they're going to decide, we're going to go ahead and deal him anyway so he doesn't become a distraction again. But they sure as hell played a lot better with him in the 18 last week. So I think in the long run, it's probably going to be beneficial to them to have him, donning a sash going into next year. So this is an opportunity for them to sell him on coming back. So I still don't think it's enough for them to beat the Eagles, though. Richmond and Fremantle. And Fremantle, I told you I was going to pick you last week. I apologize. I did tip you last week, and it didn't work out. Well, I'm going with Richmond this week, and I've got Richmond beating Fremantle by 15 points. And let's be honest, folks, we're watching. It's like watching a rerun, and a television episode that you've seen countless times. I tend to find myself gravitating towards a television program. Let's just say, for example, maybe my wife tells me that I watch the TV show MASH all the time. I haven't watched an episode of MASH in probably 2 years, but that's okay. I used to, whenever it was on, I would always gravitate towards it, and the TV would end up going towards, the MASH 4077, and I'd go ahead and see it. But Richmond is doing that exact same thing to us. It's a rerun. They're doing what they've done the last 3 years. They're peaking at the right time. They're getting healthy. They're making that march towards the finals. Now, will they get there this year like they did last year and in 2017? I don't know. But they sure look like they're going in that direction. And they've got a lot of talent on that club. And they're getting healthy. And they ought to scare everybody who's hoping for a shot at winning the Premiership. They worry me as a Cat supporter. And I know we still have to play them, I believe, in round 17. I think we play them the second to last game of the season. I think coming off of a 5, they think they have an 8-day break, and the Cats have a 5-day break. So it's almost like playing at if the MCG was a calendar, that's kind of working out for the Tigers pretty well there. But I've got Richmond winning this one by 15. Fremantle, they stumbled against the Giants. They've played some solid footy all year long. They've been one of the better defensive clubs all year long, throttling teams' offenses and keeping the scores low in games. I just don't know if they're going to have enough to be able to do that to the Tigers. I think the Tigers are too strong of a club. So I've got the Tigers winning this one by 15. Then we've got Melbourne and Sydney. And I've got the D's winning this one by 14 points. And let's be honest, the D's have to keep winning. Okay? They're in the 8th position right now. And you got a lot of teams that are looking to displace them and knock them out of that spot. Okay, so they have to keep winning. And the Swans have played some solid football in many games this year. But I think that the D's are going to get this done because they're in a must-win situation in order to stay in the top 8. And I think they're going to take this one by a little bit more than 2 goals. I don't think Sydney has enough firepower to defeat them, and I think the D's are going to take this one. Now GWS and Carlton, and Carlton has kind of been the happy story for a lot of people this year. They started to turn things around a little bit. Things have begun to look positive, and then last week the wheels fell off against the Pies, and they didn't score a goal in the second half. And the Giants, well, they proved me wrong because that's just what happens to me because I'm really good at allowing that to happen. When they thrashed the Dockers and got themselves into the 9th position, looking up at 8, hoping the D's will stumble. And this is a must-win for both teams. If the Blues want to have any shot at making finals, they've got to pretty much win out. And basically same thing with GWS. Because GWS, yes, while they're basically, I think, even with the D's, their percentage is 10 points lower than the D's. So I think that this is going to be a game that GWS takes because they're a talented club. I don't know how healthy Patrick Cripps is going to be because he banged up his knee the other day. I know he came back into the game, but he didn't look all that effective after he came back in. So we'll see what happens. But I've got GWS winning this one by 8 points. And I think that, the game of the round, the Essendon West Coast game could arguably be the game of the round. I think the game of the round is going to be Brisbane and Collingwood. And I think this is going to be a close one. And I've got Brisbane winning this one by 4 points. And, the Pies are getting healthier as we move towards the end of the season. And who knows, they may get healthy at just the right time and scare the heck out of folks before this is all said and done. The Lions are coming off of a bye week. They've got a very small injury list. And I've got the Lions taking this one by less than a goal. However, if they did not fix their goal-kicking issues while they were on their bye week, I think the Pies could still win this. And that's why I've got this one so close. Only a 4-point difference here. So I think the Pies lose this one by 4, but if Brisbane struggles to kick goals, or they kick more behinds, of course, I think the Pies will take this one. But I'm going to go with Brisbane, off the start here. So you got 6 clubs with bye weeks this week. Gold Coast, Port Adelaide, Western, Geelong, North Melbourne, and St Kilda are all on byes. And it in many ways, it kind of hardly counts as a bye week, because this round begins on Tuesday and ends on Friday, and round 16 begins on Saturday. So we've got a very quick turnaround. And those are my tips for the week. Again, please don't take my advice. This is, for hopefully entertainment purposes. And hopefully you'll, like I said, as evidenced by last week, you don't want to bet the farm on my picks. I've never placed an actual bet on anything in my life, so I'm just doing this for fun. Before I want to go, I ran into something on Twitter this morning, and I thought was rather funny, and I wanted to just maybe somebody could shoot me a message and explain this one to me. You might have seen the video clip online of the 3-year-old child in Taiwan that got caught up in the tail of a kite and was whisked off dozens of feet in the air, flapping around at the tail of this long kite. And Narrowly Meadows posted a link to it with the term "hooly dooly," which I had never seen before. That was a colloquialism that was completely new to me. So does anybody have any background on that one in terms of where that one came from? I sent her a note back saying it was kind of like, the holy moly or the holy mackerel that we have here in the U.S., but I'd never heard hooly dooly before. So if anybody has any insight on where that one came from or what it means, I'd love to hear it from you. So hopefully Narrowly will respond, and no, I doubt she's listening, but if you haven't listened to her podcast, Ordinarily Speaking, I highly recommend that one. Wow, what a power podcast. And I've only listened to the footy players on there, but she's interviewing people that are playing netball and cricket and that sort of thing. And just, the Adam Treloar story on there was just absolutely fascinating. And I know I've talked about her podcast on an earlier episode several months ago, but if you've not had a chance to do so, I strongly encourage you. And speaking of podcasts, I did want to reach out. I owe an email to this young man, but Harper from the Where Do We Begin podcast, I haven't forgotten about trying to link up with you guys and getting you onto my podcast and coming onto yours. School has started back up. I've gotten a little bit swamped. I've been a bit of a podcast procrastinator. I've been doing more and more things related to my podcast during my final weeks before I had to go back to school. And I'm now kind of playing catch up with that and having to do some of the things to get my classroom and to get my classes ready to go that I normally wouldn't do. Because, for example, I'm recording this at 7:15 on Monday evening here in Ohio. So it's 33. It's already about 9 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday in Australia. So I'm trying to get this out for the drive home. So you want to listen to my tips on your drive home on Tuesday. That's what I'm trying to get done here. So, gentlemen, I know you're doing this with your partner. I haven't forgotten about you yet. I will get back to you on your email. I'd love to get you on the podcast. It may not happen until after finals occur because, again, I'm working as a public address announcer as well. I had 4 games that I did on Saturday. I did 2 football games and 2 soccer games. So it was a very busy Saturday, and Sunday I pretty much spent in a vegetative state. So those are my tips for the week. And ladies and gents, don't forget, if you want to sign up for the mailing list so that you get each new episode delivered to you first, there's a link in the show notes. There's a short little form, for your email. What club do you support? Where do you live? That sort of thing. I'm not going to come knocking on your door or anything like that, unless I come for, once COVID is done and I come for visit. I may want to turn your house into a B&B. I'm kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. But if you'd love to sign up for that, I would greatly appreciate it. I think I'm up at around 25 people that have signed up so far. If you got an idea for a show topic or somebody you think I should talk to, please shoot me a note, shoot me a DM, send me an email at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you as far as that goes. I've got some great ideas. I have several topics and irons in the fire that I'm looking to put together. I've been reading up on one of the topics that I addressed earlier in this episode for a full kind of an expose episode. I haven't recorded it yet. I'm still writing it. Again, I've been procrastinating, doing other things, watching the games as well. It's kind of hard to talk about the games if you don't watch them. So some of those will probably start to come once the season wraps up and we're in that downtime going up into the draft and then leading into the AFLW and then the AFL season. So I truly appreciate all of you that are listening. Don't forget that you can find all the episodes for this podcast at ayankonthefooty.podbean.com, and you can also find it on your favorite podcast provider. I'm hoping you'll consider giving me a review on Apple Podcasts. Let me know what you think. If I've earned a 5-star, that's great. I would love it. I would love your honesty, telling me what you really think and what I could do better. You can reach me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can reach me at yank_on on Twitter, as also on Facebook and Instagram at ayankonthefooty. I want to thank Mr. Joseph McDade for the use of 2 pieces of his music. I'm using Backplate and Elevation. You can reach him at josephmcdade.com/music. I appreciate your hard work, sir. You can also find his music on Spotify. He's got some great stuff on Spotify. And I'm hoping you'll consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. Shoot them a link. Copy the link in a text message and send it off to them and say, hey, you might find this entertaining, or you need something to laugh at. Listen to this guy. I don't know what your approach to it would be, but hopefully you're finding it interesting and entertaining. So, those of you who are listening in here in the U.S., we've got all 6 games in this round. They're going to be broadcast here. So the entire round is going to be on TV here. Round 16, they've already announced that 7 of the 8 games will be broadcast here as well. So over the next 2 weeks, we've got 13 games of footy coming up. So if you haven't watched yet, you owe it to yourself to check out this game. And don't forget that, Australian rules football, it's why they invented the DVR. Okay? So, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, this is a game we all love. We love our teams. We're fans of our clubs. But we love this game. We want to see this game be successful. And hopefully in the next coming days, we'll know where the grand final is going to be played. Again, ladies and gents, I appreciate you listening and checking out the podcast. I hope you'll share it with your friends and your family. And I should let you know, I have reached out to one of my students, actually, who is looking at doing some graphics work for me. So I'm hoping in the next couple of months to have like some T-shirts and things of that nature available, or stickers if you are interested in representing the podcast. I'll get one for myself, because sure, I want to wear my own podcast shirt on there, but hopefully some of you would be interested in wearing that sort of thing. But it's a very talented artist that I had as a student last year, who's a senior in high school this year, and they said they would be interested in helping out. And I sent them an email yesterday about what I was hoping to do, and hopefully it's not going to overwhelm them too much. But I'm looking forward to doing that and getting that information out there and sharing that with you. But this has been a lot of fun doing this, and I'm still having fun, even though I'm busier than I normally have been while I've been doing the podcast. I'm really enjoying doing it. I'm enjoying interacting with those of you who reach out. I love getting the notes from you on Twitter, letting me know what you think. And again, ladies and gentlemen, may your dribble kick never hit the post. I'll catch you later. This has been episode number 45 of A Yank on the Footy. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on or at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook at A Yank on the Footy. I hope you'll consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. I appreciate you listening. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye.